Hey there, everybody. It's Jon Fleischman with SoDoesItMatter.com, presented by the Flash Report. And I'm very excited for our third podcast of 2026 to have a very special guest with us. And I'm going to be introducing her in just a moment. You can see her. Well, actually, you can't see her because it wants to focus on me, but she's right over there. Assemblywoman Alexandra Macedo.
Just Ali.
Allie. All right. We're here with Assemblywoman Allie, and we're going to be talking with her today on the show. And we're going to be having kind of a wide ranging interview. But before we get going, I just want to remind everybody out there that there's a few things that you could do to help us and ultimately now to help Allie, which would be to make sure that you share this. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can subscribe, you can like it. If you're watching it on Substack, you can like it, restack it. But either way, the more people you share this with, the more people will get to find out about this great member of the California legislature from the Central Valley who's working her hiney off to make sure that we can try to preserve some liberty and freedom in the Golden State. So, Allie, the way that we do this is kind of fun. I go on to ChatGPT. All my watchers are used to this. And I say, I'm doing a podcast with Assemblywoman Alexandra Macedo. Give me an introduction. And then I just read it. I haven't read this. I don't know what it's going to say.
Boy,
We're just going to find out. We're just going to find out as we go. So here we go. So joining me today is California Assemblywoman Alexandra Macedo, who represents the 33rd Assembly District in the Central Valley. She brings a much needed regional perspective to Sacramento, representing communities that grow our food, power our economy, and too often get ignored by the political class. In the legislature, she has focused on affordability, public safety, and standing up for working families, small businesses, and taxpayers who are feeling the consequences of bad decisions made far from home. At a time when one-party rule dominates Sacramento, Assemblywoman Macedo has been willing to ask tough questions and push back when policies do more harm than good. I'm glad to have her with us today. That's pretty good, huh?
I am impressed. I always get
Yeah,
worried
well,
of like the crazy things that are on the internet. So I am honored. That's a great intro. I'm gonna have to use that.
and I will say this. When I was doing one of these introductions for another one of your colleagues, Joe Patterson, last year, I was like, all right, I'm getting suspicious. So I wrote back and I said, it seems like you always write these great conservative introductions. And they go, well, of course, you're Jon Fleischman and you have a conservative Substack. So we're writing you an introduction. So it's kind of spooky.
It is. It is
Anyways,
crazy.
we'll go on from there. So, Assemblywoman, I'll try to fit in Allie, but I also want to be respectful. So, Assemblywoman, thank you for joining us today. And I think the first thing that we want to start with is maybe for our the people that are watching us to get a little bit of a handle on who you are. So, I think the best way to do that is kind of we'll make you into a superhero, and we're going to find out your origin story, right? So, how does Allie end up in the assembly? So, who are you? Where do you come from? What is your
I
background?
ask that question far too often, let me tell you. I like to be called Ali because I really am a normal person who just really loves where I live and who I have grown up with, and fighting for that in the legislature is truly an honor. And so to kind of tell you where I come from, I was born and raised in a small farming town in California named Tulare, California. My dad was mayor of that town for 20 years, so our roots there run deep, but they actually go all the way back to 1939. My great grandfather immigrated here from the Azorian Islands and started Tulare Sales Yard. It is the oldest livestock market in the state of California, still in operation. And I am the fourth generation and the first female involved in that business, and pretty much grew up on the auction block with my dad. He's a world champion auctioneer. So I don't necessarily brand the fast talking politician,
It, I
but
was
we
about
do
to
have
say,
some fast talkers.
is he the guy that's actually going hear it once, hear it twice, da 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 da, like all that stuff?
Yes,
That's
he's a
totally cool.
world champion. He's amazing. Now he uses his talents not only at our livestock market, but for charity events and things like that. So he's a pretty incredible guy, if I do say so myself. And as incredible as he is, my mom is equally, if not greater, accomplishment. She is a civil engineer and was kind of a pioneer for women in that area when women weren't in that space. And so I was always kind of riding around with her. But her father served in the Korean War. And when he came back from his service, the family dairy was struggling, and so he actually took out a $400 bank loan and started our farming operation. And so we farm today in his honor on John Evia Farms. We farm almonds and recently are diversifying a little bit into citrus, which has been fun. And my mom, being a civil engineer, She focused predominantly on ag design. And in about 2008, the rules and regulations started hitting agriculture super hard. And we were told things like, this is temporary. This is only going to apply to the bad actors. And as we know with government, that's never how it goes. So she entered that arena, and I did too. And I just noticed that this is going to be a long term fight. So after I finished my undergrad, I moved back home and started managing her engineering office. And we did project design, permitting, compliance management. But on the permitting and the compliance side, it was absolute insanity what we were dealing with. And I was kind of told no on some of our projects. And the answer was because I said so, or because somebody's, I guess, had a bad day on their drive to work. I don't know. And so one night at dinner, I told my mom, I'm just getting so frustrated. I love our clients. I want to help our clients. And she said, well, maybe you should go to law school, figure out how to beat them. So I did. I stayed managing the engineering office during the day. I'd commute an hour to go to law school at night. I would go home, really very rarely sleep, but lots of reading and lots of prayer and Jesus along the way, I guess, and lots of miles on my car. I graduated in May of 21 from law school and in the middle of COVID. So although it was probably easier to graduate law school online during COVID than it was medical school, it was still kind of a wild time to be alive. But I noticed that with the business that my mom had, and she still has, the compliance side was really the growing market. And so I started my own compliance firm that I really didn't want to be in a courtroom. I saw that a bulk
So
of
you actually start. So you actually. So you actually started a firm that to help
correct. And I own
people
it to
deal
this
with
day.
our government.
Correct. So it's called Macedo Environmental Consulting. I still own it. I work with the Air Board, Water Board, Resource Management, Environmental Stewardship, OSHA, environmental kind of, I call them terrorists. Sorry, I probably shouldn't, but the environmental justice groups, trying to get them to understand that
Well,
ag is the ultimate environmentalist because we're 100% dependent on our environment and we feed the entire world. We do something that is a superpower. When you talk about being a superhero, the people in agriculture are the superheroes of the state of California. And so then I was getting very frustrated in my job because I was seeing this growing regulation that there were legislators here in Sacramento that would hand over this hot potato to unelected bureaucrats and say, hey, implement these laws that we didn't really fully bake, but you go and implement them. And then you have a bunch of people that there's really no oversight or recourse for. And a lot of times they have, a bunch of letters after their names because they have all these fancy degrees, but they have no idea about the type of industries that they're regulating. And that's seen in our energy space, I think in oil. And we see it for sure in ag. We're seeing it in business. And the list goes on and on. So I am actually the youngest Republican Assemblywoman elected. I'm tied for first place in California's history. So it was a huge honor. And I thought I was going to come up here.
I'm sorry, the youngest Republican or or just the youngest in general? What is this title you've got? This honor?
Youngest Republican Assemblywoman. So there has been other younger Assemblywomen and there's been other younger Republicans, but I am the youngest Republican Assemblywoman.
It's like a baseball stat, right? It's like how many
Yes.
people have hit balls over center field on Tuesdays in August. But I think
Well,
it's great.
I'm the 199th woman elected to the legislature. We all get numbers when we get up here. So they wouldn't give me 200. So I guess I'm still in the hundreds. So that's kind of cool.
I
But yeah,
guess.
I mean, I came up here and I thought it was going to be way different than it was. I thought I'm going to have all of these great ideas. There's a bunch of academics up there that are going to understand it and we're going to fix California's problems. And boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, this actually goes right to what I wanted to kind of pivot into, which is, you've now had a full term. I'm sorry, not full term, a full session. That you've had an entire legislative session up there, and obviously, when you ran for office, a lot of Republican legislators would have told you, "Here's what to expect." But when you got up there, and you've been up there, walk us through how bad it really is. Obviously, there's policy disagreements, but it seems to me like maybe it's worse than that. So maybe you could give us a sense for what is it like in the super minority? Is there any grace and any kindness that comes from the majority party, or are they just, pardon my French, assholes? So what comes out of there?
So let me preface this by saying that there are some of my colleagues across the aisle that are wonderful people. We just disagree politically, and that is what I love about being a Republican is I can have a diversity of thought from you, but I can still like you and want to grab dinner or a drink with you or try to understand where you come from. So there are some of those members up here, and I've been able to work with them. And those are the people that we agree on both sides of the aisle. That's what we want more of in our legislators for California, more people that actually want to solve problems and not people that, want to, be the next clickbait or be the next, ruler of the free world. They actually care about where they represent and they want to work on solutions that benefit all Californians, not just rural, not just urban. 40 million people and the fourth largest economy, or we've fallen, I don't know, that changes all the time. But, that's a very difficult task. And the people that see that are the legislators I enjoy working with. With that being said, you talk about policy. Very little of Sacramento is policy. So much of Sacramento is politics. And that has shown in so many things that, make it to the news. But there's so many votes up here that are party line votes, right? My dad was up here one day and we were taking votes and he was sitting next to me and he goes, I'll bet you I know exactly how this vote's going to go. And I'm like, yeah, I think everybody does. So let me kind of walk you through my first year. And I think it's going to illustrate everything I need to about up here. I was 10 weeks in. I sent a letter to the Trump administration and to Secretary Duffy asking them to investigate the California high-speed rail to figure out how we've had all these years and all these billions of dollars spent and not a single track's been laid. And it goes right through my district in the Central Valley, the part that they've started. And I got a call from Secretary Duffy's office saying, hey, we're going to do this audit and we're announcing this audit down at a train station in LA. So I went down there during the entire press conference. There's protesters there screaming. They're not even protesting really the high-speed rail. They were protesting things about a bright line and all kinds of things that it was crazy. They very clearly did not know what they were protesting. And God rest his soul, Congressman LaMalfa was at that same press conference. And he said, hey, like, what do you think? And I said, I think we should go set him straight. And he's like, all right, let's go. And so we walked out there beyond the curtain and security and started engaging with these protesters, trying to understand why they were so passionate about this high speed rail. Congressman LaMalfa started, and then I heard somebody mention Fresno, and my ears perk up. And I said, well, wait a second, are you from Fresno? And he wasn't. I said, well, I'm actually from Fresno, so I know what we're dealing with. And no sooner that I finally was zeroing in and having a conversation, the first tomato came from the crowd and went to the wayside, was horribly aimed. And then the next one came for my face, and I dodged it like something out of the Matrix. And in that moment, it was just this full circle moment because my mentality through my campaign and what I told everybody is I'm going into the rooms that disagree with me and I'm going to change their minds. One thing that I think our party needs to do is recognize the people that already support us and have them join the movement. But we need to bring new people in. We need to grow our movement. And that's what I've been trying to do. So I still have the tomato. It was preserved in resin. The following week, I came
You
back and
saved the tomato.
I did. I kept the
That's
tomato.
impressive. All right.
So the next week I come back to session. Lots of people were just like, we can't believe that
By the way,
happened to you.
before you go on, I did want to thank you for a little fun story about Doug LaMalfa. By the time this runs, we will have already run. I just recorded a pretty touching podcast with James Gallagher where we just spent a lot of time talking about the congressman, and neither one of us made it through the whole thing without tearing up. It was pretty tough to lose somebody at the prime of their life. So all memories, positive memories of Doug LaMalfa are great. Uh, Doug did not pick up a tomato and throw it back.
So that's one of the funny parts of the story, I guess I left out, but since you brought it up, I'll tell it. Is the tomato, I had much faster reflexes than he did because the tomato bypassed me, but it actually hit Doug in the face. But when this story hit the media, they almost dang near cropped him out. And I guess, the tomato flying at a petite white girl was more of a sensational story than, large Congressman LaMalfa behind me. And anyway, I joke, I got all the credit for the tomato, but was the one that had to take it to the face. The picture I posted on my social media when Doug passed was him and I holding one of the tomatoes together and thanking him because he was a true inspiration for those of us that represent rural California, but those of us that just are representatives in general, because he truly epitomized the place that he represented and he fearlessly and passionately advocated for that. And that's not an easy
It
thing to
is
do.
hard to it is hard to imagine him trying to do like a Matrix move. I like Doug, but that, I spent more time talking with Doug about the best places to get mac and cheese than anything, So at least when we weren't
Yeah.
talking about freedom in America. So
Right. Well, he
an
was
old
a
friend. All
big
right. So
freedom guy.
we're back. You're back in the Capitol.
I'm back in the Capitol. I'm driving back to my district for the weekend. This is a week later. I'm headed to an event, and my chief of staff calls me And she goes, "Hey, I have some bad news. We got an email from the speaker's office that we had been ripped off of our committees." And I was the first ever freshman vice chair of the GEO committee. I was also vice chair of natural resources. I was stripped of that. I was put on the elections committee, which will come full circle in a moment. But I was first, I thought, oh my gosh, I failed. And then I realized, no, I actually, because I came out swinging, I came out, forcing people to work harder and answer the harder questions. They're trying to silence me. They're trying to push back on me. I have to keep moving forward. And so I did. I took it like I took the tomato and, kept moving. And then, flash forward to the remainder of the year, that same punishment that I was put vice chair of the elections committee, which is considered like a lower committee here, ended up all the Prop 50 stuff came through there. And then, I had my, I guess, moment up here that I was really upset about, if I'm being honest, because I am not an elections expert by any stretch of the imagination. And then I was forced to cram because they weren't showing us a lot of the verbiage and they were trying to play games, and I just wasn't going to let that happen. And then flash
We all
forward.
remember this was when they would all refuse to actually admit that they hired an outside consultant to draw these partisan lines. I thought it was kind of ironic because at the same time that you're in the committee saying, "Well, why don't you who drew the line? Did you draw the lines, right?" That guy Paul Mitchell, that guy I've known Paul for a long time. He's out on podcast saying, "I wrote the lines." Right? It's not
Right.
like he was trying, so I will do everyone here a favor. If this is something that's interesting to you, I'm going to put right below this interview a link to a piece I wrote on this particular grand moment of Allie's, where she took these folks to task, and there's a video clip in there. It just you you your confrontation of them, and I believe one of the senior leaders of the Democrat Party was in the room, like the majority leader, I think was the
The
majority
majority
leader.
leader was the one testifying. Yes.
Right. And so you were left to conclude, because we always say the same thing, which is that on the Democrat side of the aisle, the people that are really creating the bills aren't in the legislature. It's the SEIU, it's the CTA, it's all these people. And so when you get this, supposedly, I think the number two person in the Assembly Democrat structure giving the I don't know answer, you kind of realize that's because nobody knows, because all the stuff's just handed to you and you're given a script to follow. And if you don't follow the script, Ali, you broke the script. You asked them a question that caused them to have an error. Just
Well,
crazy.
that's what's so wild is as much as people, I'm so appreciative of the compliments I received. I didn't ask a gotcha question, or at least I didn't think I did. Paul Mitchell was out all over the place talking about, I drew these maps. I drew these maps. And I caught on though, because I was actually going down into the member lounge to get something to drink, and I overheard one of the journalists there asking, and they were giving 9,000 different questions, and I'm like, I just don't understand. And so we at that point they had limited the amount of time that we could talk, so I knew that I had to get right to the guts of it. But before even the majority leader was the one testifying on the maps, we had another assembly member who came to testify on the speaker's bill. The speaker didn't even come and testify on his own bill. He had one of the members do it. And the member admitted that he did not read the bill. He said, I just support the premise of the bill, but I haven't actually read the bill. And it was wild to me because this is one of the most consequential things probably that's going to come through the state legislature, maybe in my tenure, who knows. And you didn't take time to read the bill. And, then you have attorneys that are there that won't tell us who they're representing, won't tell us who's paying them to be there, what their interests are. And you said something that I think is really important when we talk about the culture up here. Yes, you have special interests that, because of the way they support the high ranking officials, they kind of call the shots on a lot of things. And if they don't like you, they don't like your bill, they're going to make sure it never sees the light of day. And that's a very difficult system to break. But I think, to be honest, and this is not me accusing anybody, amidst all of us looking into some of this fraud and some of the interesting accounting with tax dollars, I think some of that structure could topple. And I think it's going to take more people like me and some of my colleagues who are willing to call that out and saying, you're not going to ever buy me. There's no amount of money that will ever buy me and tell me I'm going to vote against my district or my conscience. Because at the end of the
Right.
day,
Well,
this is a short amount of time in my life, but I have to live in the place that is the Central Valley in California, and that's what I'm here to protect.
I mean, you go back to the high speed rail and you say to yourselves, okay, there's not been any track laid. at all, but massive amounts of money have been spent. And then you actually kind of look to see where the money's been spent. And you know what? They've hired massive number of union workers to dig, to plan, to do all these things. It's a big jobs project. And that's really what's going on here is, it's not complicated when Gavin Newsom is running in a recall that really isn't problematic for him, but they're all putting in millions of dollars, or the Prop 50 campaign, right? Or my favorite example that I like to use because it's just so glaring. Gavin Newsom is trying to figure out what to do during COVID, and the California Teachers Association publicly says close the schools, so he closes the schools, right? Or better yet, you know, he's raising money in the recall, and the state prison guards union writes him a multi-million-dollar check, I believe, to oppose the recall. And then literally right after the recall is defeated, he opens up their contract, which wasn't due to be opened up for like 2 more years, just to give them raises. And so, you look at that stuff and you just kind of realize who's really in charge. And then you go look at the bank accounts for the California Democrat Party for all these Democrat legislators, and you realize that my word's not yours. It's the best legislature money can buy. And so of course they're busy. At one point I did a political cartoon where it was like a board, it was like a conference room at the Palm Hotel in Las Vegas. And I had somebody from the CTA, somebody from SEIU, somebody from the building trades, and they were all in the room together. And there's one guy saying, what do we want to have passed in the California legislature? We're taking ideas, and literally everything is on the table. And the whole idea was the idea that before the legislature even begins, these interest groups are trying to figure out, what do we do to give ourselves an advantage? What do we do to give ourselves a raise? Anyways, it's an interview of you, so not of me, but you got me going. You got me all fired up here. So
Well, this feeds right into the Prop 50 thing that we were talking about. Paul Mitchell didn't come and testify on his own maps. His wife, Jody Hicks, who is the main person for Planned Parenthood's there. And then you have CTA there. And then, you have somebody from one of the unions that's there. And then you're saying this isn't a map drawn by special interests. And, I'm sure we'll get into the lawsuit and kind of what's going on. But that was really frustrating for me because we were getting beaten over the head by the Democrats of this is the most transparent process that's ever happened. Well, let me walk you through the most transparent process as the vice chair of the elections committee. To start things off is I didn't even find out about the specifics of the elections committee until one of the people in the media posted on X the press release that went out by the chairs of both the Senate and Assembly elections committee saying this is when the hearings are going to be. So I'm texting the chair going, what the heck? When can I see these maps? When can I see the language? And she's like, I'll let you know. Well, then the next day, the maps come out that were leaked maps. These were not even shared with me. So the public saw these maps before I ever did. And then Monday morning at 8 o'clock, I get a text message from the chair going, oh, by the way, the language is available. And there's more than a dozen Democrat co-authors on it. And I'm like, wait a second. So all of these people got to see this language before I did. And then, some of these people are like, well, I didn't see it. I just supported, the premise of it, which was strange to me. Then, so we have what's called member portfolio. And each week we can see what our assignments are for committees. And so I was waiting for the agenda. I didn't even get the agenda for the elections hearing I think it was like 20 hours before the committee hearing actually started. So then we get into the committee, and I've already told you kind of some of the crazy things. Then when they're talking about the maps in the language of the bill, one of the bills that was about the maps, it says that the Assembly Elections Committee and the Senate Elections Committee drew the maps. And me and my colleague are like, no, we didn't. And then my colleague was like, wait a second, I prepared all these questions based on the maps that were available, but they changed at 8 o'clock last night. And the chair's like, no, they didn't. They were sent out Friday. And he goes, Madam Chair, the fact that you don't know that the maps have changed, I think they had changed like almost 200 times or something like that, from the time they were leaked on Friday till then, told you all that you needed to know about this process. And then she's in the media saying, when I go to a restaurant, I don't need to meet the chef. Like, I just enjoy the food. Meaning she didn't need to know how the maps were drawn or who draw them or what they were used for, just that she had maps in front of her and she was satisfied. I mean, the whole thing was just wild. And then we tried to get an amendment in there that if you voted on these maps, you couldn't run for these seats. That we got to vote on it, but
yeah,
didn't
as
fly.
we know, the whole thing was a big railroad job, and then, ultimately, as it sounds like you wanted to touch on it, but as we all know, I don't think I was surprised the minute that that we drew a federal panel on this writ trying to stop the lines from going into effect so that there would be an opportunity to make the case for why the process and these lines violated people's federal constitutional rights. And of course, we ended up in front of a three-judge panel, two of whom were appointed by Democrats, one of whom was
Right,
appointed by a Republican president. And what do you know? The panel split 2-1.
right.
So I did read where the state Republican Party and the plaintiffs are now taking the case for emergency writ up to the Supreme Court. I'm I'm kind of skeptical that that's going to result in anything quick enough to matter for the 2026 election cycle, but we're going to keep our fingers crossed. So I did see, I guess you're now, as a freshman, right? You're now in the Assembly Republican leadership. Well,
I
although
am
I mean,
deputy
I guess,
Republican leader.
yeah. So that makes you a big wheel and a big deal. So, we're very excited. Although I guess the fewer Republicans there are in the assembly, but there's the same number of leadership positions. There's more to go around. How many committees do you serve on?
7.
Yeah, so this is the crazy part, right? Because they have all these committees, and so I bet a Democrat serves on 3 or 4, but the
Correct.
Republicans have to scramble. And would you say that it's a pretty often occurrence that you have to choose which committee you're gonna go to because many of your committees end up meeting at the same time and you can't go to all of them?
Well, okay, so let me back up for a second and then I'll answer that question. So you called me the big wheel. I am a wheel that has patched and ready to get to work because we're going to get out of the super minority. That's goal number
I
1.
I was being
And
sarcastic.
no, I know, but I want your viewers to know I am here to break the super majority. We are on the right side of things. We have the winning message. We have the candidates to do it. We have the team to do it. We just need the public to help us. So, let me tell
Yeah,
you
and
that
and
we are
and
doing what we need to do.
And my commitment to you, Allie, is that, this is the Get to Know Allie episode, which is really important in
Mhm.
establishing credibility with my readers. We'll have you back as we talk about elections and districts and where we can target and where we can focus. I don't want you to feel like we somehow have to cram everything into the first episode
Yeah,
here.
it would be a 3-hour episode, so I won't keep your people here.
It's a conversation. But on the note where I told you that we wanna make sure that our readers get to know you, we kinda do kind of a lightning round where we kinda go through and I ask you some questions, and then you get to answer them, and then our people that are watching this can totally judge you and decide whether they like you or not based on your answers that you'll never know. So are you ready to do a lightning round with me? And
So, yes, really quickly
you're
on
gonna
the
you're
committees.
gonna tie
I
off
I
a
had
story.
4
I
committees.
kinda cut you off. So finish your
No, you're
point,
good.
and then we'll do it.
So on Tuesday, I had 4 committees. You see me bouncing back and forth between the Capitol, and we call it the swing space, but it's where we're housed while the Capitol is being reconstructed, which is another episode in itself. So, no, I attend every committee, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm there for every bill presentation. But I do prioritize if there is a really bad bill to make sure that I am there to get people on the record admitting that they're willing to do these really bad things to Californians. So then I can get that message out to people saying, hey, these people that you're electing to represent you are not actually representing your best interests up in Sacramento. So, literally, that's another superpower of mine. I am in all places and none of them at the same time.
Great. Well,
So, yes,
make
with
sure you
that.
let us know what's going on. We like to cover it. And I guess this is a great opportunity for me to remind we have a lot of Republican staffers in your building signed up. But if any Republican staffer in the building signs up, you get a free upgrade to a paid subscription because you're working for the cause. So does it matter.com, sign up. And if you've got a Senate or an Assembly email, we just do an upgrade. All right, we're going to do this lightning round. Be prepared. If you answer incorrectly, we immediately end the call. So
Oh
I'm
boy.
just kidding.
Okay. I'm
So what
ready.
was the last? So the first question is, what was the last book you read?
Can't Hurt Me, David Goggins.
So what is that book?
David Goggins talks about mental toughness and kind of pushing through the voice in your head that tells you you can't do things. And also how to just kind of be an overall tougher person. And in case you didn't notice throughout the interview, being tough in this job is pretty dang important. But showing up every day It's the armor of God and my own inner brain telling me I can do this and keep fighting and
All
pushing
right.
harder.
So what was the last film that you watched?
So I currently am
And it could be
watching.
something you streamed. It doesn't have to be in the movies, right?
Yeah, so I'm watching 11/22/63, which is a series about the assassination of RFK, and it's a Stephen King movie that he goes back in time to try to stop the assassination. I'm a big history nerd, so it's been kind of interesting. And then amidst them releasing some of the JFK assassination files, so more one of those things that at night when I'm either trying to
All right.
get work done or whatever I have in the background. But it's a super good series.
We a lot of the answers that we get to that question depend if we're interviewing people that are parents or grandparents. A lot of times they'll come back and it'll be like Monsters Inc. or it'll be Cars because that's what ends up happening. All right, so favorite American president of all time, but with the caveat because we're trying to mix it up here. You can't say Donald Trump. We're going past presidents. So from George Washington all the way up to Joe Biden, who would you say is your favorite?
Ronald Reagan. That's a super easy answer for me. I love Ronald Reagan. I love his leadership style. I love his speaking style. And if you look at my dad actually looks like Ronald Reagan, but if in a former life I would have loved to have been a chief of staff or a vice president or maybe a second wife, I don't know. To Ronald Reagan.
I'll make you jealous by letting you know that I got to have Taco Bell with Ronald Reagan, and he liked the enchilada and he used the Del Scorcho sauce. So
Well,
those are
look who
some
just
things
became
to
an
know.
Enchilada fan.
Yeah. So okay, now this is even more fun. Who is your least favorite president of all time?
I think he might be everybody's least favorite president, at least on the Republican side, but that's Joe Biden and his auto pin. What
Yeah.
he's done to our country and what Trump has had to do to now clean it up is just absolutely
Yeah.
gross.
And if I was going to rank order all of the sins of Joe Biden, the number one was just literally opening up our borders for 4 years and allowing millions upon millions of people to cross through it. We don't even know who they are or where they are. All right. So now we're going to go international. So who is a current world leader, again, excluding our president, who's a world leader that you admire?
That I admire. I'm going to consider Machado one of those world leaders, although she's not elected. She was one of those people that stood up against the machine and the danger and did it anyway.
This is the real winner of the last election in Venezuela, right? Is that who we're talking about?
Yes, and she
Yeah,
actually
I think
brought her Nobel Peace Prize to Trump today and gave it to him because she felt that he deserved it more than she did.
that's great. Usually, so you know who we get a lot of people are pretty fond. I don't remember her name off the top of my head, but the Prime Minister of Italy seems to get a lot of praise from people too. She seems to be pretty popular. Okay, so we're
So
almost
see,
done.
women leaders.
So there you go. So all right, so this one's kind of interesting. We want you to tell us somebody up and coming in California politics that we should be watching that isn't you. And I will caveat this by saying that I'm forcing you to name one person, but you probably can name a bunch. So who do we keep? It could be a colleague of yours. It could be an up and comer that you've met out on the trail. Who should we be watching, Ellie?
My goodness, that is a tough question because there's so many people that I haven't met in person, but I follow them on social media. And these kids, they just get it. I'm telling you, I'm impressed constantly. I am going to shamelessly plug because he's a fellow Central Valley legislator, another young Republican, somebody that really went into the trenches with me and is just a great teammate. And that's David Tongipa. He's a good friend of mine. And we come from completely different backgrounds, right? Like I'm a farm girl from the Central Valley and he grew up in the hood of Sacramento, was like a college athlete and stuff. But he has the same passion for the state that I do. But our whole caucus is just full. I think they're all up and comers. But we have great candidates in seats that I'll come back to talk to you about our election side. But
All right. So
we've got
what we'll do
Salayan.
for people watching, we're going to put in addition to yours, we'll put a link to David's X feed down below. So when you sign up to follow Ali, you can follow him as well. And then last but not least, if you could wave a magic wand and you could change one policy thing in California, like just with a wave of a pen, what would it be? Just one.
Well, that's really tough because they all kind of feed into each other. But I'm going to go with what is really near and dear to my heart, and that would be fixing all the water issues that we have in California.
Fix the
Because I
water.
think that's kind of feeds into the cost of living. It feeds into public safety, public health, general quality of life. So fixing all the water infrastructure problems that we have in the state of California.
I think that's perfect. I every once in a while I reminded my answer I always say is if I could do one thing, I would abolish public employee unions because I feel like once we cut off them and their influence and their money, all the other problems start to become solvable. So it's almost the root cause. Anyways, I want to thank you we don't want to go so long that we lose our watchers. We typically go
Right.
about 35 minutes, which is where we are, especially when I click the magic button that eliminates all of our ums and our ahs. It's pretty cool. So I want to thank Ali Macedo for being with us today. We're big fans of yours. You're doing a great job. So keep up the good work. Make sure you look us up the next time you come to Orange County because you came down here and you met with my friend, Will O'Neill, and I felt slighted because I didn't get to participate. So
I
I'm
will be
teasing
back.
you. Yeah, well, that's all right. Will is more than happy to take all of the really cool meetings and have me take all of the not cool meetings. So if you're watching this, you can help the Assemblywoman and you can help me again by sharing this. And then, like I said below, we're going to have all the information so that you can check out her website. You can check out her if you want to follow her on social media. You can do that. And we're going to thank you again very, very much for everything you're doing, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
This was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And I would love to come back. So I got a lot more to say.